Well, let me just remind everyone that we are recording. I will cut out specific references to individual health issues. And I am going to mute everyone. Jeff, you'll need to unmute in just a minute. Nick, you'll unmute when it comes time for the program as well. So now I'm muting all and turning it over. Okay, Jeff, go ahead and unmute, and it's yours.
Good afternoon. President Steve will be joining us shortly, so don't worry. I'm just filling in temporarily. But what a great time of year to be in Western North Carolina. Just look outside. It's a fantastic time. We're tremendously blessed to be here. I'll get things started by turning it over to the chaplain of the month. I'm the chaplain of the month. So if there's anything you'd like to share with the group, please do so now. All right, please pray with me. Our gracious Lord, accept our thanks for this day and all of its blessings. Guide and direct our club, its leaders, and our actions. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to Rotary, to our community, and to our country. Bless our fellowship today and bless our efforts to serve this community well. Amen. All right. I'd like to turn it over to Ed, who will lead us in the pledge and the four-way test.
I'll unmute, and if you'll join me, please, for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And of the four-way test, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it be goodwill and better? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, General.
You're
A couple of announcements. It's always good to be able to call on a retired general to lead us in the pledge. We don't have to have a general, but it sure is an honor to have that. A couple of announcements. You should have received your love notes by now from Cecil. And like many organizations, we have some issues with cash flow. And I just ask that you take a look at those and review them and send in your checks as quickly as you can. That would be very helpful. And I'd like to put a plug in for the foundation. We're in the last quarter of the year, and if you're so inclined to make a contribution to the foundation to help further the scholarships for students from this area going to North Carolina schools, please consider that as well. Cecil, I know that you have at least one announcement with respect to a new member and whatever else you'd like to tell us.
Thank you, Jeff. I would just piggyback on your remark about the love notes. I love you all, and that's why you get a note. In addition to that, thank you to the numerous people who have, Paula, who have in fact already sent their money in and or paid online. I picked up a number of checks this morning at the post office, and we'll get those deposited on Monday, and your accounts should be up. If you want to look at them online, you should be able to see those by late Monday afternoon. We do have a new member nominee, kind of sticking with our new tradition of Nick, whoever does our program has to join our club. And David Adams, Chief of Police of Waynesville, who verbalized interest in joining the club when he was doing our program, has in fact been nominated by John Keith. He has been through the membership and classification committees and been passed on to the board of directors, and Of those board of director members who responded, all said yay. So we now, on behalf of the board of directors, I recommend to you and open the 7-day comment period as to positives or negatives. Feel free to drop me or any board member or President Steve an email with your thoughts on that particular nominee. Jeff, that's all I would have at this time.
Thank you, Cecil. Mark Bumgarner, you sent a notice about the next open door volunteer opportunity. I just wanted to clarify that is scheduled for Thanksgiving. Is that accurate?
No, we will not be volunteering on the Thanksgiving week. That's the 1 month that we miss in the year. So there will not be a volunteer opportunity in November.
I remember last year there was a church or some other organization that took over that day.
Correct. I think Long's Chapel steps in and takes care of that.
Well, great. Well, we will get back in line with that service opportunity for December.
Thank you.
And that was my notification, not Mark's. I wasn't sure, so I knew we'd generate a conversation if I put it in there.
I blamed Mark for that, so I take that back. Sandy Giles, do you have an announcement about Polio Plus?
Yes, but can I just make that announcement right after the program?
Okay.
It'll be very brief.
All right. Absolutely. Are there any other announcements that anyone has? All right. How about Happy Dollars? Not that there was an absence of things to watch on TV last night, but one of the things on ESPN was Appalachian playing football. And it seems like someone would like to have a happy dollar about that great win that the Mountaineers had last night.
Yeah, I think Mark should do that. I tell you what, Jeff, I know that was directed toward me, so I'll happily kick in $5 for a nice to see 45-17 whipping of Arkansas State last night.
It was a great game. There were moments of challenge, but it's always good to see our local schools from Western, HCC, Appalachian, whenever they're participating in extracurricular activities, to whoop up on those people from Arkansas, among others. Anybody else have a happy dollar announcement?
I didn't hear Mark match my $5. Did you?
I know. That's
Cecil, this is Ed. I think probably all of the club members are going to watch next month's bill very closely to make sure you're not making that about 70 happy dollars as you know, a little forward finance.
I thank all of you for your early match.
Well, I do step forward for the challenge. $5 for Happies. That's from Mark.
fantastic.
All
That
right.
is great.
And I'll step forward in honor of the former Joseph, which is the mascot of the Appalachian Mountaineers. For Cecil, I remember getting in my blue van and charging up the hill to Appalachian to a ball game to watch Cecil celebrate carrying his shotgun out there on the middle of the field, but they were smart enough not to give him any bullets for it. But I'll do $5 also.
Fantastic. It was, I saw that. It was a sight, and also saw his brother play up there. So we're doing pretty good today.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, thank you all. I don't have any further announcements or issues I'd like to bring. If no one else does, I will recognize Sandy again, who will introduce Mr. Hall, our guest speaker. And keep in mind that we've got a long line of weeks now where our guests become members. So just keep that in mind. Sandy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. You may or may not know that tomorrow is World Polio Day. And Rick Croskery and I are your co-chairs for Polio Plus and CART. And we are very fortunate today to have a very special program from a man who has, done a lot for this cause. And he has a very interesting bio, which I will share with you, apart from just what he's done for polio. Nick Hall, PhD, is a medical scientist and the recipient of an honorary MD, who since 1979 has conducted groundbreaking studies linking the mind and body. His research has been featured on CBS 60 Minutes, the BBC's Nova series, and the Emmy award-winning television program, Healing and the Mind. He also was the author of multiple books, including the best-selling audio series, I Know What to Do, So Why Don't I Do It? Good question, huh? In addition to his academic pursuits, Nick is no stranger to the more pragmatic aspects of how emotions impact health. After earning his way through college, wrestling alligators and milking rattlesnakes, he worked as an intelligence operative for the US government. He also led a National Geographic-sponsored expedition to the West Indies, where he studied mass stranding behavior in whales. He's been a member of the Rotary Club of Temple Terrace, Florida for over 20 years, serving as district governor of District 6890 from 2018 to 19. Nick, we appreciate you being with us today, and we look forward to what you have to say to us.
Well, thank you very much, Sandy, and thank all of you for inviting me to join you today. I spoke with Rich earlier this morning, and he regretted that he wasn't able to attend, but he's going to be over here having dinner with us Thursday night, so he'll get all the details and hear more about what I'll be talking about today. I want to begin by putting things into historical perspective. And one of the questions that I was asked when I first began doing cross-country cycling back in 1965, it was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school, and I rode from the Black Hills of South Dakota, the Black Hills Reptile Gardens, to my home in Chicopee, Massachusetts, a distance of a little over 2,000 miles. And one of the things that I remember is almost daily, multiple times a day, I would be asked the question, you are 17 and your mother lets you do this? And I think it was her philosophy, which arose during World War II. As a teenager, 18, 19, she was one of the few women who elected to remain in London during the Blitz. Most of the women and children were shipped off to Ireland in preparation for what was thought to be the inevitable invasion of England by Germany. But she chose to stay because her business, where she worked, was considered somewhat essential. It was an oil company. And I've got recordings of the stories that she has told during those years. And it was rather frightening every night, hearing the air raid sirens go off, wondering if one of the bombs would land on her apartment. Was it really going to be necessary to take shelter in the tube station, which was serving as a bombing raid station, sanctuary? And so her philosophy became, you live each day as though it's going to be your last, but you assume that you're going to live forever. And so when at the age of 14, we were living in Massachusetts, and by the way, I happened to get to Massachusetts. My stepfather was in the American Air Force, and he was stationed over here soon after he married my mother. I was 10 when I came to this country. And so when I wanted to go out to South Dakota and get a summer job out there in the Black Hills, not initially wrestling alligators, but rather filling up Coke machines, sweeping floors, she said, oh, absolutely, go for it. And the Reptile Gardens is a very respectable place now. In the 1960s, it was a sideshow. Earl Brocklesby, a book has been written about him, was a showman and an extreme risk taker. And so when people got bitten by rattlesnakes, alligators, which inevitably happened because people came there not to be educated, but to be entertained. They wanted to see us get bitten. In fact, we got bonuses if we did get bitten. And I was bitten several times by both rattlesnakes and alligators. But it was a risky business. And it never occurred to me that there was anything unusual about being allowed to go off and do something like this when my mother never said a word. It was always, yeah, go ahead, be careful, but have a good time. And so one of my philosophies became never regret. If you have the opportunity to do something, if it means dropping out of school, if it means quitting your job, there'll always be another opportunity later on. And so that's pretty much the way I've run my life. The role of the End Polio campaign came about in 2015. Now, I've crisscrossed America multiple times on bicycles. I've done Massachusetts to Washington. I've done the Black Hills to Mexico. Twice the Baja 1000 off-road race. I was the first person to do that in 1967 on a bicycle, and in fact set the record that year. But I thought in 2015, it would be nice to celebrate the 50th anniversary of my very first ride back in 1965. So I went on eBay and found not only the same model bike that I used, the old Raleigh 10-speed, but I even waited almost 6 weeks to find the right color, the same dark brown color of the bike that I used back then. And I hopped on an airplane, flew out to San Diego, was picked up by a good friend up in Oceanside. And I set out, spoke at his Rotary Club in Oceanside. Then he drove me down to the Pacific Ocean, and I ceremoniously placed my back wheel in the sea and then set out heading east. So it was while we were having a holiday party at the district governor's house, or I should say the district governor-elect. I was his assistant governor. And he said, Nick, I'm planning my official club visits. And I said, well, when are they? He said, well, my first one is going to be in August. And I said, sorry, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be riding my bicycle. And Tom looked at me a bit puzzled. And I told him what I was going to do. And he called over the current district governor and said, Nick's going to do this bizarre trip. How about doing it to raise awareness and money for the End Polio campaign? And so since then, that's exactly what happened. I have ridden from 2 years ago, rode from Tampa up to Toronto for the International Convention. This year, did the Seattle to Tampa run, the longest I've ever done in one fell swoop. And each one has been connected with the End Polio campaign, with the Bill and Melinda Gates endorsement and their willingness to match the funds, and the World Fund doubling whatever people gave from their DDF funds this past year. It's kind of hard to tell exactly how much was donated because clubs along the route would make their contributions as well. But I'm estimating that this last trip was probably in the neighborhood of $80,000. And that kind of makes me feel good. I must say, when I sprained my ankle in Richmond on my way to Toronto, I was on the phone talking to Tom, now past district governor. And I said, Tom, I'm thinking I'm going to have to turn around and come back. It ended up I fractured my ankle, hit a curb, went down, twisted it badly in Richmond, and I was halfway. So am I going to go back to Florida or continue on through the Alleghenies to Toronto? He says, Nick, for every mile that you ride, a lot of clubs are giving $1 per mile. You are going to be saving, and I forget what the number was at that time, numbers of children from polio. And I said, yes, Tom, but my wife and I have committed to $1 a mile too. Think how much money I'll save if I don't do it. So I got that constant reminder. And I must say, I still remember that because it was reassuring that I wasn't doing this for nothing. And Well, lots of interesting experiences along the way. First of all, the equipment I used, I told you in 65 was a vintage 10-speed bike, a Riley Carlton, and same bike I used in 2015. This year I upgraded it. If any of you do cycling or are familiar with bikes, the whole thing was put together from scratch. I got the frame out of Michigan. It's a Surly, what's called a long haul trucker, made out of chromoly steel. Aluminum would be a lot lighter. The carbon fiber bikes are incredibly light, but I would not be caught on one of those on a long distance trip, because when you're carrying 60 to 100 pounds, 100 pounds some days in the desert Southwest when I was riding from Oceanside, you don't want aluminum. You don't want carbon fiber, because if those frames are damaged, if you get a dent, well, you're not going to dent carbon fiber, it's just going to shatter. I wanted chromoly steel. If anything went wrong with that frame, there wasn't a good old boy somewhere along the way with a welder in his pickup truck who couldn't have got me going in short order. So yes, a heavy bike, but steel flexes. So it's a more comfortable ride, much more comfortable than aluminum. I've got an aluminum bike, and I'll ride it if I'm racing with friends, but not for a long trip, never. The bike throws a lot of people off. There's only one sprocket in the back, and there's only one chain wheel in the front. And a lot of the bikes today, they'll have half a dozen plus or minus in the back, at least 2, maybe 3 up front. So a whole range of gears. It looks like my bike has only 1 speed. And people make comments about it when I'm out riding for leisure. Well, what they don't know is built into the hub is a roll-off gear system. They come out of Germany, very expensive. I paid $1,500 just for the hub. But inside that hub, 7 gears plus an overdrive, which gives me the same range of gears that a 30-speed mountain bike would have. I have the ability to change into any gear I want, at a dead standstill, waiting for a light to change, or I can dial it while standing on the pedals, going up a huge mountain pass, the Continental Divide, for example, which I did many times this summer. And so the only maintenance is you change the oil once every 3,000 miles. The chain stays in one position the whole time. There's no torque on it as it shifts from one gear to the next. So it's a very sensible setup. I knew that I was going to be out in some very remote territory, as I was in 2015 as well. But Montana, Wyoming, some very, very long stretches between towns, and with COVID-19 and all the precautions they were taking, especially in Washington State, the stores were not open, restaurants weren't open. And even the ones that were open wouldn't let people in. I had to order takeout and then eat the food on the sidewalk. Well, it also meant that I couldn't plug in my iPhone and recharge it, or any of the other electronics that I had. So I had a special hub put onto the back, onto the front wheel, a dynamo, a USB port attached to the handlebars. So as long as I was going 12 miles an hour, which was not difficult at all, I could get a full charge on my iPhone from a totally dead battery within about 5 hours. So I was completely self-sufficient. I had a tent on board. I had repair equipment, everything to fix semi-major mechanical problems, but of course the obligatory tubes, patches, and so forth. Had a lot of flat tires. On the ride from Oceanside to St. Augustine, a little over 3,000 miles, I had 1 flat tire. That was it. I had the same tires on when I arrived in St. Augustine as I did when I left California. And when I rode to Toronto, 0 flat tires, none. The tires I use are Schwalbes. They come out of Germany. They are tough as can be. And so on this trip, I carried 2 spare tubes just in case it was going to be a long trip. And just to play it really safe, I had 2 brand new tires shipped into the reptile gardens in South Dakota. That was definitely going to be one of my stops. So that I was, whether the tires needed it or not, I was just going to put a brand new set on. Boy, am I glad I did that. I have lost track of the number of flat tires I got on this trip. And it wasn't until I got to Billings, Montana, came out of the Continental Divide, that I realized what the problem was. Here in Florida, we have no hills. The steepest grade that I was able to train on was 274 feet. The Continental Divide took me up to 6,393 feet. There were similar passes going up to 4,000 or 5,000 feet in the Cascades, the Columbia Mountain Range, not as high, but very steep grades in the Black Hills of Wyoming and in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Even the Alleghenies had some challenging hills. Well, what I realized is up in Montana, I would get out of my tent in the morning and I carried a little thermometer. The temperature would be 32 degrees. There were several days. In fact, one night it was, in fact, going into Bozeman, Montana, it actually snowed. This is in June. Wasn't expecting that. Now, think about what happens to atmospheric pressure, the pressure inside a tire as well, when you ascend to 6,000 feet. When the temperature goes from freezing, and then when you come out onto the high plains, the temperature in the air might go up to 70, even 80 degrees. And so what I realized is I was wearing out those tires because I'd start out going up a mountain pass. I'd spend half a day struggling up one side. The tire pressure would be a little bit too low when I got to the top. Then I'd go flying down the other side, hitting speeds of 30, 40 miles an hour. On a very heavy bike, you really pick up a lot of momentum. And there was no way I was going to even think about braking after hours going up at about 3 or 4 miles an hour. I was going to take advantage of every bit of speed I could get. And that was a lot of wear and tear on those tires. And so I think that was the reason. I ended up buying a floor pump, great big thing, strapped it to the front of the bike. It looked ridiculous, stuck out on both sides because I could get air into it very quickly. And I was checking that air pressure after I figured out what the problem was 3 times a day. I'd check in the morning, I'd look at the map, see what kind of terrain I was going to be hitting, check the temperature. When I got to the top of the mountain pass, I would adjust the pressure again. And once I did that, no more flats. So that was a problem I had never anticipated. One of the realizations I had was people judge you by your appearance. And when I was 17 and did that ride, young kid, riding back to his home to finish high school. And I would be invited to people's homes. By the way, back then they had vagrancy laws. And as part of that, you could actually book yourself as a lodger in local jails, which I did. I discovered that while sleeping in a public park in O'Neill, Nebraska. It was around midnight when I felt his foot kick me in the side. I was in a sleeping bag, bright light shining in my face, 2 policemen asking me, what I was doing there. I said, well, I was trying to sleep till you woke me up. Told me I couldn't sleep in a public park. I had to get out of there, get out of town. And I pointed to my bicycle. I said, there's no way it's going to be safe for me to get out on Route 20 this time of the night. Asked me how old I was. I told him. And so they said, yeah, we agree. I said, we're going to give you a choice. You can come into the jail with us voluntarily, and we'll book you as a lodger. You can spend the night. You can leave tomorrow morning. And the other option is if you say no, we'll take you in. And if you refuse to leave, we'll take you in and we'll book you as a vagrant. In which case, you'll have to meet with a judge on Monday morning, and he'll decide when and if you can go. So, I had a few questions. So what time is checkout? Do you serve breakfast? The obvious questions. I started doing that every night. I would pull into a town and I would go straight to the police station and say, look, do you have any room? And if they didn't, if it was a busy Friday or Saturday night, they'd take me down to give me directions to the local fire station. Or when I got to Indiana and the Midwestern states out there, I can't remember if they were Amish or Mennonites. but they ran some incredible rescue missions. Wonderful food. I'd be fumigated along with all the other homeless people, and always got a good night's sleep. Had to suffer through a god-awful sermon before we got fed, but that was okay. It was a small price to pay. Many times the sheriff or the chief of police would take me home with them. I'd have dinner with the family, talk to the kids about riding bicycles across the US, and then they'd take me back to the jail cell, where I actually felt more comfortable. You meet some interesting people. People avoid contact with me. I'm 72 now. I was 72 when I rode from Seattle. And I'm sitting there on a sidewalk eating some food at a truck stop. And people would not talk, partly because of COVID-19, of course, but this was true even back when I did the ride to Toronto, and then 2015, the ride from California. And I remember when I was in Texas, a dust storm came in. I took shelter behind the truck stop and barely avoided it. The wind was kicking up, and that sand will strip the paint off the side of the car. It'll do terrible damage to your skin if you get caught. And I've been warned about that when I called ahead to a bike store in Arizona, in Phoenix, asking, what should I be aware of? What are the problems I might encounter? What can I do to avoid them in the heat? Because I did that ride in the summer, and it was 100, 110 degrees some days. And I remember they told me about these dust devils, as they called them. So I knew what I was up against when I saw this thing coming across at a bit of an angle ahead of me. I took shelter for an hour, checked the radar on my cell phone, and realized that within about 30 minutes, I'd be able to set out again. But I didn't know how far it was to the next rest area. By the way, in Texas, west of the Mississippi River, you're allowed to ride bicycles on the interstate highways, on the shoulder, which I did. It's the only way you can get across Texas without doing all kinds of zigzags. Rode all the way across Montana, Idaho, Washington State on, I think it was Interstate 5. So the distance between exits was very important in terms of how much water I could carry. I wanted to know how far it was so I could adjust and just carry enough. I didn't want to carry extra weight, but at the same time, didn't want to run out. So I walked up to the gas pump. I'd noticed this pickup truck pull in. He had come from the east. So all I wanted to know was how far to the next exit. You've just driven from there, you probably remember. I said, "Excuse me, sir, could you tell me?" And he cut me off. He said, "Go away, I don't have any money for you." I said, no, I'm not asking for money. I just, get out of here. I don't have any work for you. I was puzzled by this. Here I am, a Rotarian, raising money for the end polio campaign, but realized my bike was parked on the back of the building. So people couldn't see the bicycle. Oftentimes that would sort of loosen things up. I looked like a homeless person. I've lost track of a number of times I've slept in abandoned buildings, behind truck stops, with homeless people. And typically the conversation is, a lot of them travel by bike. They all not nice ones like mine, but still all of their possessions piled on top. And my bike gets pretty grubby after a few days out there in the rain and going on sometimes dirt roads. I look very scruffy. So they'd say, "Oh, well, what do you do for money? Do you steal? Do you beg?" A question I've never been asked before. I said, "I've got a little bit saved away, and I get odd jobs along the way." I wasn't going to tell them, what I was really all about. And we'd offer to watch each other's equipment while one went in to get coffee for the others. It really is. And none of those people are out there because they want to be. They're people like us. They were teachers. They were business people. They might have gone through a nasty divorce. They might have gone bankrupt and living out on the road. And a lot of them actually prefer it. They like the flexibility and the freedom to stay up north in the winter, south in the winter, up north in the summer. And so that's what they thought I was. And I realized people judge us based upon our appearance. That's all. And I've never really fully understood that until I was on the receiving end. One of the saddest moments I saw, there were two incidences, and this happened on the Texas ride. Well, in Texas, on the southern tier, California to St. Augustine. And I met this chap, long beard, I've got a picture of him, bib overalls, riding an old vintage BMW motorcycle with a sidecar. I'd stopped at it was on the Indian reservation, and I'd stopped at the information center, and that's where he was parked. And I was curious about him. I said, so, where are you going on that bike? And he said, oh, I just go everywhere on it. And he saw my bicycle. He said, that's what I would really like to do. But he said, I had polio when I was a child. And even though I'm able to get around, he said, I just don't have any strength in my right leg, which was most affected. And it affects my balance too now. So he said, I put a sidecar on my motorcycle. Nobody ever goes with me. I just put stuff in it. And that's how I get around. Now, there was a man who had a physical limitation, yet he found a way to still pursue his dream of traveling around on two wheels. In El Paso, Texas, I was riding along the Rio Grande River through this beautiful orchard of pecan trees, nice shady area, very popular with cyclists all over the place. One of them, who's going in the opposite direction, turned around, caught up with me. He said, where are you going? He said, look, you're decked out to go some long distance. And I said, yeah. Started in California on my way to Florida. And he said, oh man, I said, I've always wanted to do that, the southern tier, ocean to ocean. That is my dream. I said, well, why don't you do it? He said, oh no, I couldn't. I'm the youth director at a local church. I couldn't be away for the couple of months it would take. He said, it's not going to take a couple of months. I said, I've only got 1 month to do this trip in. I'm teaching at the University of South Florida starting in the fall. I've got to be back. And it's easy to do 100 miles a day. It doesn't take that long. And pretty flat. Not going for any mountains after Southern Cal. He said, well, no. He said, I'm too old to do that sort of thing. And I said, how old are you? And he was 2 years younger than I was at the time. And what I realized is people trap themselves in a cell, like a prison cell. But the bars are made not out of steel, but rather their beliefs. I'm too old. I'm too crippled. I've got too many responsibilities. And I thought, first of all, I felt kind of bad that there were so many ways he could have overcome that. But I've wondered how many people don't really live their dreams because they believe that they simply can't. We respond not to reality, we respond to images in our mind. Transduction of visual information, auditory information, somatosensory information. It's the image that is going to give rise to the emotion. It's the image that's going to give rise to every behavioral response, you name it. And those images are so easily shaped by nothing more than beliefs, your past experiences. And so that's one of the reasons I just totally ignore them. And so when I was asked the question, and your mother lets you do it? Yeah, so what? Now, I will say this. I have 2 daughters. When they were 14 and wanted to start doing odd things, new stuff, I was absolutely frantic when they wanted to ride their bicycles to the nearest 7-Eleven. I think that's too dangerous. And then I had to stop myself and say, you hypocrite. You were riding across the United States when you were 14. Give them a break. And I say, I have. Our vacations were riding bicycles across Iowa, part of Ragbri. My youngest daughter was 10, the eldest was 12. And my wife and I would just sort of turn them loose at the beginning of the day. We'll meet you at the end of the ride today. It might have been 100 miles, maybe 50 miles, give them some money. There would be 15,000 people going along the way. A lot of people looking out for especially little kids. And we've done other things too. They've each been on cross-country motorcycle rides with me. Yeah, I'm kind of into 2 wheels. We've done sailing trips, all kinds of outdoor stuff. And I can see, and that's all they talk about. now when we have Thanksgiving gatherings, Christmas time, any type of gathering, and stories are being told, it's always about, Dad, do you remember when we had to dive into that ravine when the tornado came over us? Or remember when I fell off the boat and there was a freighter coming and you didn't have time to get me in, just sort of dragged me across the channel. All of these kinds of things. And one of the reasons why I do these trips now, and I'm encouraging my grandchildren to do them, is because it makes you optimistic. Like my mother, when I called her after 9/11, I said, what do you think? She was living in Massachusetts. I was down with my family in Florida. And she said, well, you know, I'm terribly saddened by it. But she said, I don't really know what all the fuss is about. She said, you know, the poor people in Dresden, Germany, those of us who lived in London during the Blitz, we went through this every day for months, for years. And she said, you know, I remember stepping over bodies on my way to the office, counting the empty desks, wondering, you know, knowing that those people didn't make it through the night. And that's the way it was, day after day. And so what I realized, and I've had similar experiences with really rough times, that when you have those types of experiences, you can pretty much handle anything by completing the statement, I am glad I am not. So when I'm in a really nice hotel, about to reach for the telephone, I want my room changed because I can hear the ice machine down the hall. These rides, sleeping out in the middle of nowhere in freezing temperatures without the right equipment, I can now complete the statement by saying, I am glad I am not sleeping in a cornfield with a corn cob jammed up my shoulder blade, listening to freight trains rumble into Omaha every 15 minutes, which has happened to me. And so it gives you a way to reframe whatever's happening now. So when people say, why do you do this? Why do you do these 300-mile kayak races, which I do now? Why do you do these cross-country bicycle rides? It's because it gives me a way to feel optimistic that I can handle anything down the road in the future. The question I get now, when people say, and how old are you? I say, 72. And your wife lets you do this? Nothing has changed. Everything's still the same. The only difference is men still need a woman's approval to do something. It's just switched from my mother to my wife. And to answer that question, I always remind Hazel that she knew what I was like when she married me, and she acknowledges that, and is one of the most understanding, supportive people I've ever met. She'd never be caught dead doing it. Well, she used to ride with me on a tandem when we did the Ragbri rides, but it's wonderfully supportive. And so my answer is yes, she does let me do it. I'll end on that note. I forgot to ask what is the drop dead end time. So if there is still more time, I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have. And Sandy, since you did the intros, I'll let you monitor the questions. That way you can end it when you need to.
Okay, we have till 2:00.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Questions?
Well, this is Mark Bumgarner, and I'm curious how you carried 100 pounds. What sort of containers, side pans, or what did you use?
I had a rack on the back and 2 pannier bags attached, Otley bags, waterproof. Across the top of the rack, I had, it looks like a milk carton, a milk case box. It's made by Thule, and it looks kind of funky, but you can just throw all kinds of loose stuff in there. That's where I kept my spare tubes, tools. I buy, some bananas, apples during the day, and I just throw them in there, put a net, bungee net over the top. It would hold it in, and it was right there. I could get to it. In the front, I had, on top of the rack, I had my tent, the pump, and a little camp seat, a little foldable thing. So when I was sitting on a sidewalk in front of a 7-Eleven or a truck stop, I could be reasonably comfortable, and often do that. in the front, 2 more pannier bags. And that's where I kept my camping equipment. Not the heavy stuff, but I wanted not too much weight up front. I wanted most of the weight over the rear axle. So yeah, it's what really adds up the weight is water. And when I was going, I carried 2 10-liter bags with me. Each one, I think, weighed like 15 pounds. The water's heavy. And I had 2 of those filled on very long stretches. So that's how you get up to, well, but in the Texas ride coming across in that god-awful heat, I say Texas because I was in Texas forever. I think I went 3 time zones in Texas. And I started from El Paso and I went all the way to the, almost to New Orleans. I had to get off the interstate because Louisiana doesn't let you ride on those. But that was a hell of a long time in Texas. It feels like that's all the ride was. This ride, not quite as bad. I only ever filled 1 of those bladders, even though I had 2 halfway, because I'm always trying to calculate, what's the next distance. So that's how I get that weight. That's how I packed it. Don't carry anything on me, and water jugs too, water bottles. Have those attached to the frame, so I can grab something to drink very quickly.
Thank you. This is Cecil. I'm curious about the nature of your interaction with local Rotary clubs as you pass through their communities, and whether or not you had any interaction.
When I was doing it pre-COVID-19, very little, because all of the meetings were live. And the chances of my being in close proximity to a club at the time they were having their meeting was very, very slim. And realized that, once I got east of the Mississippi, the whole ride to Toronto, I was on back roads. And that's not where most of the Rotary clubs are. Occasionally there'd be one, I'd see a sign on the edge of town and it would say, Rotary Club meets at the Holiday Inn on Tuesday at 12 o'clock. And it would be Wednesday. So I'm not going to say a whole week. This year is very different because of Zoom. And I actually attended meetings. I pull off on the side of the road. And there's a global club, which I tuned into every single week and gave them an update. There were clubs, now Rapid City, South Dakota. I spoke to their club via Zoom ahead of my arriving in the Black Hills. But then they came out. They weren't meeting but over the weekend when I was there, but 6 of them came out to where I was camping. There was a little restaurant nearby and we had a great lunch. I can't remember the name of the town now. It's in Arkansas, very close to Memphis. One of the Rotarians was a cyclist and he rode out and met me along the way and then guided me across the bridge over Mississippi and showed me all the really good roads to get through Memphis on. There was another club. They had their centennial meeting. The district governor, the president of Rotary International had been there. The day before I arrived, they had built this beautiful plaza in the middle of the town and all the dignitaries were there. Well, they continued the celebration and I rode in there at the end of the day and they had television cameras set up and all of that. And all we did was talk about during the interviews, Rotary, the End Polio campaign and so forth. So I had a lot of interactions with Rotary clubs here. In fact, 2 Rotarians from my own club, they drove up to Missouri to take me out to dinner. That was in July. And you recall Florida was, my God, we were national news because the number of cases. And they just wanted to get out of Florida. So they just went on a road trip. And they met me. I had a satellite transponder, which shows exactly where I am on Google Maps. It's updated every 5 minutes. So they saw what road I was on, where I was, estimated when I would be at a certain point. They did call me the day before and gave me a little warning. So they had found a place that would be suitable for me to stop at the end of the next day. And we ended up meeting there. And had a nice dinner. And then they met me again a week later, somewhere in, I think it was maybe I don't know, Alabama. I'd have to look at the map to know which state. They were on their way back to Florida. And so we met for breakfast. They happened to reach me early in the morning. So I had a lot of interactions with Rotary clubs this trip, which Zoom made possible.
Thank you.
Nick, were most of the funds you raised from other Rotary clubs or Rotarians, or did you just get donations from all kinds of people along the way?
Well, I wanted the clubs not to give the money to our district. I wanted their district, their clubs, to get the credit for it with RI. So what a lot of them did, now they could have gone on our Facebook page, and I did that restraint, non-Rotarians. They said, oh, I'd like to donate. And I'd say, all right, here's the Facebook link, here's the website. If you go on there, there's a button you can press, and it'll take you actually to Rotary International. And then the foundation, and they would have a link with the ride so they know where to credit it. But the Jonesboro, Arkansas, that's the one where they had the centennial celebration. They sent out an announcement to all of their members, and they had done a calculation of how far it was from there to the state border. And it was like 200 plus miles. And they encouraged all of their clubs to give $1 a mile for that part of the ride in their state. And I understand it was very successful. And some people, individuals, gave 50 cents a mile or 10 cents a mile, whatever they felt comfortable with. And that's what I have no idea how much was raised. I know the club in Rapid City was going to do something, not that exact strategy of miles to the border, but they were encouraging their members to make donations. But it was all done through their club, their district. That's why I don't know exactly how much was raised.
Nick, can I have a question? Can I have a question, Nick?
Yes, Paul.
This is very interesting, but I know that a number of people have done cross-country bicycle rides, not the way you have done it, though. And it's very interesting the way you've done it. But have you met with any of them? I know we have a dentist here in town, Eric Morrison, who just repeated the trip, not the way you did, but with trailers going, I'm sure, with him. Also, Michael Coles, who found in Atlanta, who founded the cookie company, American Cookie Company. I think he tried to set the world record, he called it. But have you communicated or kind of got to know some of the other riders who've done it in different ways?
I occasionally meet people along the way who've done trips like that. But as you point out, very few of them do it unsupported. They usually will have a vehicle driving along with them, carrying all their equipment, which really does make it a lot easier, especially going up mountain passes. However, this trip, I did meet a person. It was in Wyoming. I was on a very quiet road, 2-lane highway, no shoulder. And I spotted this bicycle. Person was walking and pushing the bike. So I had a little bit of a tailwind. I was making good time trying to get to Custer, South Dakota that night. But I put on my brakes because I thought, well, the person's walking. That means they're in trouble. They've got a flat tire or a chain's broken. And I had tons of spares on my bike. I was equipped to handle most anything. And as I slowed down, I realized it was a young woman, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Her frame was exactly like mine. It was a Surly. The bike was decked out the same. She had racks on the front and the back, bags on the front. She was carrying a tent, completely self-sufficient. And I crossed over. Her strategy was, mine was to do 100 miles a day. Hers was to do 50 miles a day. And she would walk 10 minutes every hour. And I happened to catch her while she was walking. And the reason she did that was to relax different muscle groups and kind of spread it out. She had taken an Amtrak train to New York and then jumped on, took the bike with her, and then got off, started riding back to Seattle. So a young woman doing this completely, totally by herself, same way I was doing it. And we compared notes. And she took pictures of my bike and, you know, liked some of the setup. She liked that Thule box I had on the back and wanted to know where to get one. And she had something on her bike, which I liked. And we probably chatted for a good 30 minutes. And then it was time to push on. We kind of regretted we weren't going in the same direction because it's very lonely out there, especially on these long windswept sections. And I don't know why it was. I got some hellacious headwinds this trip. There was a big sign flashing across the roadway in Wyoming and all open countries, this prairie. And it said, warning, 45-mile-an-hour plus crosswinds. And I'm riding a bicycle in that. Setting up my tent it was a real ordeal. And I had to immediately throw stuff inside bags just to hold the tent down while I set it up. And then once I got inside, I wasn't about to get out because I was afraid the darn thing would blow away. And that's when, you know, it'd be nice to have somebody to talk to and commiserate with. Because, you know, when I would call my wife and say, it was really windy, she said, oh, yeah, right. Okay, well, it's windy.
Nick,
unless you're there, you can't appreciate exactly what it's like, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your time today and for all that you've done to raise funds for Polio Plus. We thank Rich for connecting us with you. It's been very informative. If you bear with me for about 2 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to share with you our district governor's initiative for polio. He's calling it Take Out Polio. And the Gates Foundation is matching funds 3 to 1. So if you give $40, that will result in 120, which will purchase 200 vaccines and earn you a pin that says you've saved 120. A gift of $120 will be matched to 360, and you will have bought vaccines for 600 children, and you'll receive a pin to that effect. So he's asking us to, I don't know if some of you saw Melinda Gates a few weeks ago talking about how the pandemic is taking resources from other needs like this. So I think it's important. There are only 2 countries left that polio is endemic in, and that's Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it's essential that the Rotary continues its efforts with the World Health Organization and UNICEF. We've given some $1.8 billion to this effort since 1979, and we've got a little ways to go yet. So Cecil, do you want to tell them how to pay for it or how to notify you? Or?
Sure. At this point, I'll be sending out a specific email, and if you'll just reply to that and let me know how much, if any, amount you would like to donate, then I'll put that on your next quarterly set of love notes. This right now will go through the club, and we'll talk further with Mark about whether that should then filter into the foundation or go directly to RI. I don't know that we've made that particular decision at this point, but you will get a specific email, and if you're lucky, you'll get more than one. Or I should say, if you respond quickly, you'll only get one about donations to polio. Take it out.
Thank you, Cecil.
Could I make just a follow-up comment? One of the questions I was always asked was, what do you mean you're raising money for polio? Don't you know that people are dying from coronavirus? Shouldn't that be the priority? Well, what people need to know is that right now, our polio network is being used to identify COVID-19 cases, especially in the undeveloped countries. The labs are being used, the polio labs are being used to do the testing. And when a vaccine does become available, the arrangements have already been made. The same network that disseminates the polio vaccine is going to be used to disseminate the coronavirus vaccine. And so it is not really an end polio campaign, it's an end infectious disease campaign. And you may recall the Ebola virus outbreak in West Africa several years ago. Not a single case, it never spread into neighboring Nigeria. And the reason is because the end polio campaign workers, the healthcare workers were in place, they had these networks set up, and they were able to nip it in the bud before it even got past the border. So it's unfortunate we brand it as polio, because while that is the number one priority, the fact is that network is finding many, many other uses.
Thank you, Jake.
Didn't mean to take the time, but just wanted to throw that out there because your point was very well taken. We really do need to keep the effort going, because viruses, all it takes is a small mutation for the polio virus, if enough of them come back, and the vaccine isn't going to work anymore. I mean, it's that simple. We've got to eliminate it completely. Otherwise, we'll be back at square one.
Nick, thank you very much for your contribution to Rotary and to the world community. And it's been a pleasure having you as our guest today. And you're extremely impressive. You make me feel lazy and uninvolved. But again, thank you very, very much. President Steve is on the call now. Steve, is there anything that you'd like to add before we dismiss the meeting?
No, I'm very much impressed with Nick. I thought his first trip was, 3 years ago or something, but he's been doing this quite a while, and it's very impressive. I hope you took some pictures.
Tons of pictures.
I'm sure you didn't. 100 miles a day, you did not have time for pictures, but thank you very much for bringing your presentation to us, and tell Rich hello Thursday when you see him.
I will do that. Thank you. And Steve, Jeff, thank you Jeff, you've been running most of the meeting, but Steve as president, I thank you and all of your members, everybody here, for inviting me to come up and speak to you.
Thank you very much.
And it's so easy with Zoom.
We'll be happy to have you come in person sometime.
Love to do that. Love to do that. So come up and visit Rich and Kathy, and we'll make that a plan.
Bring your bike and ride downhill back to Florida.
Yeah, right. Actually, it is downhill.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Nick. Thank you. Jeff, are you dismissing us?
Is Steve going to dismiss us? I'll dismiss us. If there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jeff.